Hello everyone, welcome to Standard 10 History. Please take page 2 of your textbook. In the previous virtual class, you learned about the historical research method, critically examining the historical sources, and the writing of the historical narrative. Today we learn a new term, historiography. What is historiography? The writing of critical historical narrative is known as historiography, which means the narrative that you write should stand the test of any critical questioning. A scholar who writes such a narrative is a historian. Students, you are aware that so much is happening in the world at every moment. So, how does a historian decide what is to be written about? Let's shift the focus onto you to find out the answer. Many of you have at some time maintained a personal diary. It would have been an impossible task to mention every little detail of the day. So you would have written about whatever you feel is important on that day. Using that basic understanding, we realize that a historian also cannot include every detail about the past into the narrative. And so, the inclusion and interpretation of historical events by the historian depends on the conceptual framework adopted by him or her. It is basically his or her understanding on how different things, people, or events connect with each other. The style of writing is also determined by the conceptual framework. Now, this conceptual framework is used not only by historians but by any scholar doing any kind of research, as it helps to organize ideas. Now, historiography, or writing history as we know it, was not prevalent in the ancient societies. Does that mean that the ancient societies were not interested in knowing about their past? No. Ancient societies all over the globe used various means, such as cave painting, storytelling, singing songs, and ballads, to pass on the stories of valor and bravery of their ancestors. A ballad is a poem or a song narrating a story in short stanzas. All these traditional methods are classified as sources of history in modern historiography. But it should be noted that in the past, many societies who didn't have a written script were excluded from world history because historians believed that they had no way of knowing what had happened earlier. But thanks to new studies, with historians understanding different sources, a good deal of their history was also unearthed. The early histories are mostly stories of disasters, floods, famines, plagues, and wars. Let's take an international trip now. We are now at the Louvre Museum in France. And here you have the Mona Lisa. But today, we're not focusing on her, but on the earliest inscriptions that belong to the Sumer civilization in Mesopotamia. What you see on the screen is a fragment of the Sumerian stela or standing stone slab. This is probably the world's first historical narrative. The picture shows a forward marching file of soldiers holding shields and spears, and you can see the general in the front. The stele of vultures was erected by the city of Lagash to commemorate its victory. You can see them celebrating in battle gear. The stele's name relates to the vultures depicted in one of these scenes. The whole stela is not there right now, but you have fragments of the same. Coming back to historiography. Modern historiography has four main characteristics. The first, its method is based on scientific principles. You need a rational approach while you embark on this journey. The formation of relevant questions is important. Now, these questions are anthropocentric in nature, which means humankind is considered to be the important element of history. It is based on actions of the people in ancient time. History does not suggest any interrelation between the divine and human deeds. Now, answers to these questions are supported by reliable evidence, evidence that you get from various historical sources, such as written, oral, material, or audiovisual, and not hearsay. History basically presents a graph of mankind's journey with the help of past deeds. Now, modern historiography traces its roots to ancient Greece. The word history comes from the ancient word historia, meaning inquiry or knowledge from inquiry. And the father of history is Herodotus. He is said to use the word history for the first time in 5th century in his book The Histories. What you see on screen are translations of his work. From ancient Greece, moving on to the 18th century. Now, in the 18th century, saw the development of scientific principles, and modern historians wanted to achieve a deeper understanding of human activities. So, man by 18th century had made progress in philosophy and science, and scholars wanted to use the same scientific temper to study historical truths. So, in 1737, the Göttingen University was founded in Germany, and with its opening, scientific research and academic teaching was given high priority. An independent department of history, apart from philosophy, was also one of its most important features. And later, other German universities also became centers of historical studies. Now we see there were certain scholars and their contributions which are important in the development of historiography. One of the earliest ones is René Descartes. He was born in 1596. Now he insisted on verifying the reliability of the historical documents. In his book, In Discourse of the Method, Descartes shares his framework. One of his main lines of thought was skepticism, that everything should be doubted until it could be proved. Never accept anything as true until all reasons of doubt are excluded. And thoughts should be ordered. That means starting with the simplest and easiest to know, and little by little growing to more complex knowledge. Our next scholar is Voltaire or Francois Marie Arouet. He was French, born in 1694. It was his opinion that with objective truth and chronology of historical events, social traditions, trade, economy, agriculture are also important in historiography. He was the first scholar to make a serious attempt to write the history of the world. In 1739, he had written, "My chief object is not political or military history, it is the history of the arts, of commerce, of civilization. In a word, of the human mind." And therefore, because of his understanding that all aspects of human life is important for history writing, he is called the founder of modern historiography. Another important philosopher is Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Now, he was a German philosopher born in 1770. He insisted that all historical reality should be presented in a logical manner, and timelines of historical events were indicative of progress. He also was aware that as changes came in time, the presentation of history also would change with new evidence. His philosophy convinced many scholars that the historical methods are not lesser in quality, even though they are different from the scientific methods. He also wrote many books, one of which is Reason in History by Hegel, and his lectures are all compiled in the Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences. Now, one of the theories that he professed was that if you have to grasp any event, you have to have the meaning in two direct opposites. The human mind cannot understand the true nature of that event without understanding opposites, which means good, bad, true, false. Now, this method of analysis is called dialectics. So, first, a thesis is proposed, and then an antithesis is proposed, which is contrary to the thesis. After a logical discussion of both, a new theory is proposed, which is the gist of the thesis and the antithesis. This process of arriving at a new thesis is called synthesis, and many philosophers still use this method today. Students, today we learned about the tradition of historiography, modern historiography, development of scientific perspective in Europe and historiography, and a few notable scholars. Now, please pause the video and take down these questions. Using a web diagram, display traditional sources of history. Enumerate the 4 characteristics of modern historiography. Explain dialectics. Write short notes on René Descartes, Voltaire, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Please make sure that you have a physical copy or a PDF version of the textbook with you to answer these questions. Thank you and God bless.